Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all here. I'm Rachel Doyle and I'm the Director of Community Work Ireland, and we're one of the partners with the Community Development and Health Network in the VEEP project, which I'll be talking about later on. So I won't get into it now, but just to say you're all really welcome and looking forward to this morning's discussion. Martha, do you just want to say
Yeah,
hello?
my name is Martha Griffin, and I'm a peer educator with the Dublin North Northeast Recovery College and a partner in the Mental Health Community Development Network as well, which we will talk about. Hi to everybody.
Okay, so today we're really focusing in on exploring and looking at an initiative that the Community Development and Mental Health Network undertook, um, producing a mental health and community development declaration called the Ballymun Declaration. So I'm going to share my screen and just give a little bit of background to to this project, to this initiative, and then Martha is going to talk more about the Ballymun Declaration specifically. So just give me 1 second. There we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Is it sharing? And sometimes if I leave it like this, it's better than actually doing a slideshow, which can, is it okay if I leave it that way? As opposed to the slideshow? Does that look all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to start by introducing Community Work Ireland and the Community Development and Health Network in the North, talk a little bit about our understanding, our shared understanding of community development, speak a little bit to the VEEP project and a little bit of background then to the Community Development Mental Health Network, which undertook the development of the Ballymun Declaration. And then Martha is going to get into more detail with you on the Ballymun Declaration itself. And then we're going to have the most important part, which is breaking into groups for you to have a discussion, share your own experiences, views, and opinions. So just to start off by, as I said at the beginning, I'm Rachel Doyle and I'm the Director of Community Work Ireland. And we're a national network of over 1,000 members who are community workers, activists, volunteers around Ireland. And we, I suppose, our role is to act as the national organisation that promotes and supports community work as a means of addressing poverty, social exclusion and inequality, promoting, protecting and advancing human rights and achieving social change for a just and equal society. So we're very clear on our understanding of community work or community development, what it means, the type of methodology that it is, which I'll speak to in a minute. And then if I get this right, Joanne and Eleanor, you can come in. The Community Development and Health Network then is a regional organisation working in the North with local communities across sectors taking action on the social determinants of health, improving health and well-being and reducing health inequalities. And I suppose viewing health in the broadest sense of the word health. And CDHN has been around for 30 years and is a really useful and really broad kind of cross-sectoral membership of over 2,400 individuals and 110 community and voluntary groups. So they do have, CDHN really has extensive kind of coverage across the North. So we're a great partner for us to be working with. And then maybe just to say that the All Ireland standards for community development set out very clearly a definition of what community development is. And this is based on kind of international understandings of community development as well. And this definition is also reinforced in the Republic's strategy for the community and voluntary sectors, sustainable, inclusive and empowered communities. So the state in the Republic have also adopted this definition of community development. So it is not everything that happens in the community, but it is a development and a developmental activity that's comprised of a task and a process. So the task is about achieving social change for a just and equal society. And then the process of it, We don't do it by doing research. We don't do it by just doing campaigns. We do it by working on the principles of participation, empowerment, and collective decision making in a way that's very deliberate and structured and coordinated. So it is a very distinct methodology of working. And this is the definition that we bring to our work. We all bring to our work on mental health. And maybe then, so coming very much from a rights-based perspective to mental health. So then the Voice, Equality, Experience and Power project, the VEEP project that is organising, and thanks to Eleanor for all the organisation work on today's event. So the VEEP project essentially is about creating a platform for community and voluntary workers and organisations, a platform that focuses on mental health and poverty and inequality and human rights. So we're working to address the social determinants of mental health and the root causes of poverty and inequality across the island of Ireland. So together, this project is funded initially by the St. Stephen's Green Trust and now by the Shared Island Fund. And we're just at this stage, we've spent a lot of time building north-south links, dialogue, webinars, workshops, sharing experiences across the island. So our purpose is about using our knowledge and experience to create a momentum for a transformative rights-based approach to achieve mental health equity. That's community-led, preventative and focused, and most importantly, probably working for systemic change. So it's led by CDHN and ourselves in Community Work Ireland. Well, it's really our Community Development Mental Health Network that's leading it, which is hosted by CWI. And there are 13 partner organisations in the VEEP project. So in the first year, we set up a kind of like a partnership platform and connected local community development and mental health projects north and south. And as I said, creating opportunities for sharing good practice and learning. We're at the moment then using open dialogue and discussion platforms, again, building that shared understanding, that cross-border understanding, building a shared and common language, looking at what changes are needed north and south, systemic changes to implement good policy and practice to build that transformation in terms of mental health across the island. We're also looking at and highlighting, and today will be a part of that, good community development practice and peer-to-peer approaches. And then that last bullet point, building recognition with mental health policymakers about the value of inclusive, collaborative, co-designed processes to build consensus with people and communities. So I guess we kind of are very much of the view that any policy around mental health or any practice or any service can't and won't be effective unless the people who are most affected are at the decision-making tables around that. So building inclusive and participative and collaborative approaches is essential for us in terms of the work on the VEEP project. Again, to say that the Community Development Mental Health Network, sorry, I'm flinging lots of different organisations and networks and platforms at you now, but there are different sort of entities involved in this work, and the Community Development Mental Health Network is hosted by CWI, and there's over 70 groups and individuals across Ireland in the Republic working towards our vision. So the Mental Health Network's vision is a society where people are free from coercion, where mental health and well-being and recognition of distress and madness are valued in the interests of the communities in which we live, and where healing, empowerment, inclusion and equality are celebrated and realised. So for the first year or two, I would say, of the Community Development Mental Health Network, we spent a lot of time focusing in on our vision, and every word was poured over, I think, and also our values. So we're very much informed by the social model of disability, focusing on rights, not needs, moving from needs to rights, and the rights of people to have control over their lives, their decisions, and their access to services. And also ensuring that people have a right to make decisions even when they might be bad decisions, just like we all can. And our values then are, again, we spent an awful lot of time, and on the CWI website, these values are all set out and explained. So we don't just list them, we explain and talk in more detail about what each of our values are about. And those values again around, I won't call them all out, but equality, compassion, respect, human rights, social justice, participation, empowerment, trauma-informed, recognising diversity, and that there's huge diversity across the island of Ireland in terms of people's identity, the communities that they come from, and their experiences, and the need to take that into consideration in relation to the development of all policy and mental health practice. So that's just kind of a background to where this has all come from in terms of both organisations, North-South, CWI hosting the Community Development Mental Health Network, and then from our collaboration and discussion, North-South, developing this VEEP project, sharing learning and sharing practice. So I'm going to, unless anyone has any questions, I'll just hand back to Martha.
Like that as a no, and I'm going to try and share.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Martha, there.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Am I able to be heard?
I can hear you fine, Martha.
Oh, Grant, perfect. It might be a lag on Rachel's end. That didn't do anything for my nerves.
Sorry.
No, I think most of us can hear
you. Phew. So I'm going to run through, I suppose, the Ballymun Declaration, and it's timely to look at it again. It's been 18 months since it was declared. And I suppose when we're looking at it today, we're looking at it with the eye of an All-Ireland piece within the VEEP network, North and South, and seeing, I suppose, is it relevant? Does it need updating? How is it happening in practice? So I'll just run through the process of how it came about and a little bit about what's in it. And then we will put you into groups. There'll be 4 groups, and we'll be taking 2 call to actions in each. And we will try and take good notes on that. If you are in a group that you're kind of saying, oh, I wish I was in the social determinants group, or I wish I was in the other group, you can feed back on that within your group as well at the end, because I think it's important to capture. We were trying to think of the best way to do this without giving the whole 8 within the time we have. So that's what we structured, and we have some lovely facilitators that will be taking notes on it as well. I know Eleanor's email said we were hoping to finish up around 2-ish, so we're going to go for an hour and a half without the break. So we're going to try and keep to that, so just that you have a knowledge of time as well on that. Rachel was saying that the Mental Health Community Development Network started in 2019, and we met for the first time in Iraq in February 2020, and then COVID hit. So we became an online network, which was good in some ways and it wasn't good in others. As you can see, conversations and things on Zoom aren't the same as if they were in the room. So we brought people together in a real kind of collective way. Some organizations paid for food, some provided premises, people kind of pooled their resources to bring people together, because we thought it was important for a symposium, a community development symposium in DCU in June 2024. And we asked people before they came, I suppose, what were their names and what were their involvement in the network. And this was kind of what the day looked like. So, there was a welcoming setting the scenes, kind of bringing people together, a lovely walking debate, round table, discussion about kind of policies from an international and national, and then small group work to kind of inform a kind of next steps and the feedback as well. There was 13 counties represented, and there was 100 people there, and there was a beautiful kind of energy in the room on the day, and we were in the Solace room in DC, which is lovely. So it's kind of a breakdown of where people work at the local, national, or both kind of level. Kind of who was in the room is here. So there was a good mix of kind of youth, community, community development specific target groups like travellers. There was a good portion of lived experience, academia, managers, psych-up and kind of community development programs, outreach project workers, boards of management and volunteers, and then the kind of statutory and coaching kind of psychotherapy kind of pieces. It was just asking people why they wanted to kind of come in. And we found through the network that there is a lot of good community development pieces happening in different organizations. A lot of organizations are recognizing that mental health is coming in the door and that the community development approach is kind of a way to kind of work with that as well. So there's a lot around networking and kind of, I suppose, finding better ways of doing things. And so that was the kind of hopes from the events. So you can see people's voices kind of feeding into it as we're building towards kind of working to what needs to happen next on the day. A few smiles and energy. So we talked about kind of the new paradigm. I suppose in Ireland we have our sharing the vision policy, but further afield we have the World Health Organization and the UN and the CRPD and a whole load of other kind of new documents that are showing a new way for mental health. And I suppose there was a discussion about that. And then we had small groups of kind of what are the 4 priorities for transformational change that you would like to see, including things that are happening already. So that was the kind of capturing as well. So that was the kind of the day before we met. And I'm going to stop sharing there and I'm going to share the Ballymun Declaration. So computer, please work. Share. So this was then brought back, I suppose, to the Community Development Mental Health Network. We worked on it. We worked on it in small groups. We brought it back. We sense checked it. And this is what we've come up with. And already you can see there has been development in the 18 months. And as I said, it's good to keep the eye on the All Ireland piece as well of where, you know, Ballymun. And I didn't realize that the naming of the declaration was contentious until Rachel was saying that at the last meeting there. But that might be from the Dublin side of the house. So it just has a background on what the network is, our vision that Rachel already explained, our values that we did take a lot of time to think about, a bit about the network and what our commitments were, and then the symposium that I just went through as well. And the call for actions, there's 8 of them. So these are the ones that we're going to get you to split into groups. So we have what we're calling for, and we're using the rights language of duty bearers, I suppose. You know, we are rights holders and there needs to be duty bearers, and that really changes the power dynamics when you're moving from charity to kind of our needs to a rights kind of framework. You know, people are charged with making sure that these rights are enjoyed by all. So the first one is in relation to social determinants of health. So the other things that affect mental health, and we've specifically named some of them like poverty, housing, racism, coercive control, emotional abuse, and then who the duty bearers are in that. So a lot of the government departments and state agencies, funders, so we've put in a few of those as well. So it'd be good to see a critical kind of view of this now. The support from the state of a community development approach to mental health. So I suppose we see a very strongly kind of funded biopsychosocial model, but community development. And that is in our sharing the vision in the social inclusion chapter under one of the domains. And the mental health community development network met with some of the people who are charged to look at that, to see if we can collaborate. I'll come back to that in a second. So the development and implementation of policies that prioritise community development approaches to mental health as well. are kind of grouped together, kind of, and appropriate community things that are happening in the community between the two. Cohesion, collaboration, and funding to support and achieve the network's shared goals and visions. Recognition of the importance of educational institutions in children's and young people's mental health. So that's kind of focused at schools. And then mainstreaming holistic approaches to teaching and talking about mental health throughout the education system at all tiers of education to make sure that that new paradigm of mental health is included in training. The development of cultural competencies or cultural appropriateness in practice and training and services for those delivering services. And we have lovely examples of the CHUMS project working on that and cultural immunity. And I see Corja in the room there and some of the partners that are involved in that. And centralizing a holistic understanding and approach in responding to mental health issues through peer and community support provided from a person-centered, trauma-informed perspective across the individual's life cycle. And I suppose the next part of it is just any of the documents that support the call to action. So it's quite a long one. I'll just skip down through it with the sustainable goals, UNCRPD, which Ireland has now signed the optional protocol just last October, the social determinants of mental health with the World Health Organization, the Ballymun Declaration, some really good reports from Danius Pouros, the former Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health, the HUM framework for meaningful engagement with people. So that kind of participation piece and meaningful participation piece. Community mental health services, person-centered and rights-based approaches. So you'll see there's a lot of these, but again, with that eye of all Ireland, it would be good to make sure that all of it's represented. And some of the language may have changed actually in 18 months, which will be an interesting discussion on it. I'm going to stop sharing here. And I suppose some of this is already happening. As I said, we met with the HSE, who were responsible for recommendation 5. Rachel, have you got that you can share that for me for a second, please? Recommendation 5, or have we lost Rachel?
No, I'm here.
You're here.
Yeah,
I'll let you
just
share
give me a
that.
second.
No problem. We met with some people from the HSE last Friday, and this is where community development is specifically named in sharing the vision and the social inclusion chapter, and it's recommendation 5, as I said, and it's the policy people that are involved in it. I think it was the start of a really good conversation about where the Mental Health Community Development Network can kind of work with them to really look at community development approaches to mental health.
Yeah, so this is a recommendation in sharing the vision around that we kind of latched on to in terms of community development. So it talks about an action around new and existing community development programs which promote social inclusion, engagement and community connectedness should be appropriately resourced and developed in line with the proposed National Mental Health Promotion Plan. Someone has their... I
think they've been muted now.
Yeah, so I'll just see if I share it again now. It might come up as a slideshow.
Great. I suppose I'll just talk to when we met them, they're doing a lot. But I suppose the critique of what we would see them doing, and some of their things are very good, is that it mightn't necessarily be community development. So we've started that conversation with them. They're doing some stuff on social prescribing, and they're doing research with the National Women's Council on that. And they're doing some stuff on positive psychology, minding your mental health. That men's counselling initiative that the minister announced about a month ago is one of the initiatives that sit under there. They have an Australian program that they're piloting in 2 areas called Act, Belong, Commit. And I suppose our initial kind of thinking and response to them on that is, when you're looking at it from community development perspective, rather than putting things onto communities, find out the needs what that are coming for the communities and implement that, and then the need for moving from individual kind of pieces to collectivizing, and they were quite open to the discussions. We're going to be meeting them again soon. So some of what we will look at today will feed back into that as well. Did I leave anything out, Rachel, on that?
No, I think that's pretty much where that was at. So we met with, I think it was 3 people from who are kind of responsible and part of the implementation of sharing the vision, and I think they were very open to talking about community development and to acknowledging that a lot of the work that they're focusing on is very much about individual one-to-one supports, as opposed to looking at rights and kind of how do you bring people together to participate, to have a real say, because of course, like a lot of our conversations up to now have talked about service user involvement as being, the way forward, which it isn't necessarily, because it just focuses again on individual experience. And a lot of that doesn't involve real representation. So they are quite open to having those discussions.
Brilliant. And I suppose another example then, and I know John's in the room, I was going to ask Jennifer if she was there to talk to it, is kind of Gateway doing kind of a housing piece from a community development perspective. John, do you want to give a few words?
CASU, Community Action, I can't remember the full acronym. CASU is a union bringing people together that are affected by housing issues. And they're like, I suppose, Gateway's role in that. We're facilitating a meeting on the 25th next Tuesday, or Tuesday week, and that we're trying to establish kind of in particular how the housing issues impacting people with mental health difficulties. A lot of people that are like we've done some work on it, and it's like basically people are falling between stools, between whether it's the social work team and mental health teams, and then social work teams in local council areas, and not being prioritised. And actually, the average wait time is 14 years from the group that we worked with to identify in trying to get housing, and just the amounts of people now that are ending up in hostile situations, and basically, in terms of for further negative consequences then for their mental health, because those environments just don't lend to positive mental health in general, what we're hearing. So those are the kind of issues that we're unearthing with our membership, but basically being part of the union then, and making sure there's the voice of people with lived experience of mental health difficulties are central to that work of CASU. So that's work that's going on at the moment. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Thanks for jumping in there. I'm going to just check as I go through, because I have an awful bad feeling that I messed up with my dividing people into groups. So team 1 and team 2, who's going to be facilitating that in the groups?
Are these the actual calls to action? Yeah.
Yeah, I have John down in room 1 for those 2.
Perfect. Room for team 3 and 4?
3 and 4 is room 2, and that's Liam.
That's changed now. That's changed, Marty. You told me to change it.
I did. That's why I panicked. So okay. I'll be looking at, I think I'm looking at 3 and 4, sorry, and I had Lehman for 4 and 5. Sorry,
5 and 6.
Okay, I'll switch that around then.
And then Rachel for 7 and 8.
And who's doing 4?
Me.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, apologies. I'm glad now. So I suppose your facilitators will have these slides. So we're looking for, I suppose, initial thoughts on the Ballymun Declaration, examples of where it's happening and practices. It'd be really good to capture that. Any changes or comments around the call, or updates in policy, law, practice since the Ballymun Declaration, and kind of any ideas around next steps or ideas from communities that can feed in there as well. You're grand. Well, you can kick off with a bit of feedback, John, just to capture, I suppose, what you covered briefly. Okay.
I have the unenviable task of trying to read my own writing without glasses, so good luck to me. Yeah, we were looking at themes 1 and 2, and that's in particular the social determinants piece, and broadly speaking, in terms of how the state, pushing the state towards resourcing community development approaches properly or more fully. And in terms of Eleanor, I know you're in the group, so if I'm missing things, if you could, if you feel free to join in, or anybody from our group, if I'm misrepresenting. So in terms of, we were just looking at people's thoughts in general of the Ballymun Declaration, and kind of like Lisa is a social prescriber, a community development background, but just really encourage that, you know, there's spaces like this and also the network, but to be like establishing the rationale in these calls. So just really just encouraged, and like, you know, I think it's energizing for you know, network members, and Lisa, you're often, you know, as a member, but that actually that this agenda is being pushed by both networks here, because it needs to be, and basically because we're still in an age where it's a real struggle, like, you know, and Thomas talked about kind of the difference between, like, you know, individual trauma and collective trauma, and, you know, just like, you know, what actually happened to your people, as well as what happened to you, or beside that, and just basically, but there's still, like, there's a hell of a lot of work to do in terms of the whole system and the established services actually moving from looking through an individual lens towards collectively seeing what the issues are and what the supports can be put in place, and also just again the thoughts, just the politicization of these collective issues, in terms of the type of issues that impacting people from marginalized communities or marginalized groupings is really important, that, you know, there's a really clear analysis, and the state is challenged to provide for attending to those issues in a collective way. And just highlighting, like, again, why this is important is because it was recognized being marginalized, being on the margins, because if we come from different backgrounds, that actually in society today, that the people that are our communities are people that are, you know, are more at risk, and that's why these are supports, and politicizing these issues are so important. So I think that's kind of like largely the feedback in general in the first one, and just general thoughts, just bit like, yeah, just really encourage that these issues are being put on the issue collectively by both networks. So that's the thoughts piece. Will I move on to then, we kind of sandwich together the, did I miss anything on that, do you think, Eleanor, or anybody from our group, just in terms of the thoughts?
No, that was a pretty good summary, I think.
Okay. In terms of then, as all good conversations do, take longer than time for. So basically we sandwich together the next pieces, which is in terms of looking at good practice, or, you know, in terms of policy shifts or even policy conversations. So it just like, that's where the writing comes in. Okay, so part of this conversation was as much as naming some of the challenges of the barriers of the work you do, as well as what's been happening in a positive sense, and just like recognition that, like, there's some examples of mental health services working in with community to try and identify and address the collective needs, but they're low on the ground and often don't get implemented, like, you know, the great gathering data but not necessarily actioning things, and just that actually we still have a situation where in the main, that mental health teams do the best they can are still working in mental health silos, and that there's a gap between what's happening in the community, organizations working collectively and identifying kind of the needs or the rights that aren't being met with actually what's being provided for within the system itself. So there's a big gap there, and that's the work ahead. And there was also a suggestion, like, you know, just like Lisa gave an example in social prescribing, where, like, I'm coming from a community background, that like the social connectedness piece, because I think that's what, when you showed the sharing the vision piece, they talked to, there was community connectedness there, but really, like, what does that mean in terms of belonging to a part of a community? And if it's really going that route, that actually trauma-informed communities and the approaches to that needs to really be prioritized and properly resourced. Also then, one of the pieces of work there was, I think, again, it's that kind of thing where you see, like, sometimes you see it, you go to different spaces and you see examples of how the work in community is kind of being linked up a little bit, but it's just like going in terms of gaining momentum for the work that we're doing, but also to make sure that the people that we're working alongside and the communities we're working alongside are properly supported, is that we really need to link up what's being available and what the outcomes are for that, because we can only strengthen that work if we're really showing that and trying to link up the work, which will then form the analysis. The cultural the piece is just really okay. So this is what Jennifer is talking as well about, just the cultural piece, and just really important in terms of the literacy piece, like, and it's, I think there's an awareness of it, particularly in the community sector. We're quite strong in awareness, but actually bringing it into practice. Eleanor, you mentioned there's a pack available in terms of the mental health literacy for people coming from an ethnic minority. But basically a lot of work to do there, because it's a huge barrier in terms of supporting people that are coming from cultures, in particular where talking about mental health is just not part, like it's not what might come up naturally, and that's a big piece of work for us to do. So a lot to do, but again, and then also Karen was giving examples that there are, like, of services working in with communities, but it's just going, yeah, it really stands out when you see it. And they tend to be small projects, and there's a lot to do, because then how does it move from something that works really well on a local level to actually being moved forward and fully implemented? Then when you see actually this type of work works when there is joined up thinking and working together. So that's kind of, so some of it there was in terms of also the policy piece. Lisa mentioned pathways to well-being, which was really interesting, because it showed various aspects of, like, the community development, the piece. It showed basically the kind of themes we're talking about and where they come up in different departments in a southern Irish context. Which I know is a big piece VEEP has been working on. So I think, Lisa, could you share that actual pathways to wellbeing policy with the whole group, please? Because I think
Lisa's already actually shared that into the main group. That chat has gone into the main group.
Okay, great. So there is some policy, but just very finite example. Not sure exactly which department that came under, and that, like, there's been community mental health networks set up as well internally within, I think it's the services, and my council's involved, but there's a real lack of consultation. There's duplicity. So actually another piece of work is, like, people that are using this language of community and networking and participation, that actually they really need to be trained up in what is real meaningful consultation and genuine participation.
John,
so
I might have to stop you there.
Yeah, so that's I had more, but sorry, that's as far as I got. Okay.
Type up.
That wasn't a summary, that was an essay.
Okay, there you go. That's me, Liam.
Thanks very much, John, and you did a good job reading your notes, and I look forward to getting them typed, please, if possible. We had a discussion around kind of community development and funding of the activities of the network that were promoting community development pieces. We said that it'd be a great idea to have a community development approach in every social policy. There was an agreement on that, I suppose. There was a huge discussion around implementation. There's good policies, the words are used, but actually what's the meaning on the ground? There was a talk about kind of collaboration and kind of working with people, and then the need for not bringing in stuff and going from the ground up. We had some examples of the Take 5, Give 5 as moving from the individual to collective. We had Thrive as an example in Balbriggan, and they started with we don't really do the policy stuff, but they actually do locally change policies within the council for things that are happening local. There was a talk about kind of co-optation of the language as well. In the north, it's around trauma, and that's been taken. In the south, it's kind of the lived and living experience kind of piece on it, no joined up kind of things. Resourcing was a huge piece that came up again, and I saw it say that came up in yours, John, as well, of kind of resourcing community development pieces. Safe spaces came up in ours, and I think I'll leave it there with there was my interest is piqued on lots of things like the neighbourhood model or the Southern Trust Wellbeing Cafe, and I've taken some kind of notes on things as well, which are resourcing community development and implementation of plans and genuine collaboration was kind of the sum of ours. Did I leave anything out from our group? Apologies if I did.
Martha, just a quick one there on because it's written in the declaration, and the word principles is missing in one of the themes. So we talked a bit about principles, community development principles, and living by them and working through them, but also that connection between community development principles and the human rights based approach.
Thank you, Joanne. Cool. So move on to Liam.
Okay. We, in our group, and it might be reflected in the summary, there was only one, everybody bar one person was working in the south, but the person at least working in the north was working cross-border, which was great. There's a couple of kind of things that kind of linked with the others. So the idea, language was very relevant in ours, and I'll come to that in a second. But we didn't follow the script exactly. We just kind of followed it as we could as the conversation went on. So the first thing I'm going to say probably is a response to the end part of our brief. So one of the things that seems to make sense was in terms of, yes, the Ballymun Declaration, but perhaps more so the network that brought the Ballymun Declaration to fruition. So it's more about that collective maybe, and then what the collective came up with. The words I've taken down was, it's quite encouraging because it might lead towards more collaboration in the community, which is desperately needed because there's a dissonance there and there's a disconnect in the community between, for example, information that's available and maybe only available to the hierarchy of service provision, and also a disconnect to what's actually happening on the ground. There's also some disconnection between funding resources and initiatives that people are expected to implement anyway. And the idea of more collaboration and more connection might actually help with that kind of dissonance between funding, information, and initiatives. Also, there seems to be more of a sense through this process of moving towards solidarity and interconnectivity. Now, I'll just link that to the last question about what about the Ballymun Declaration being a way of moving towards an all-island kind of similarity. And I suppose as far as we got in that was that, yes, the more we have this interconnection, this collaboration and kind of interconnectivity, the more likely something like the Ballymun Declaration could be something that could evolve for across Ireland. The other thing that we came up with, which both other groups come up with so far, language is also important. And also, although it's underpinned by a human rights framework, we also need to be aware that even that language is not necessarily a language that kind of meets with the diverse perspectives of people with lived and living experience, and indeed policymakers, etc. as well. So although that might be something we're striving towards, it's something we have to be aware of in terms of not get lost in just creating another language for people not to understand. So the talk was about ensuring diverse perspectives are accommodated in this language. And I was able to throw in a practical example then, which is one of our briefs, that actually the second part of the VEEP aims and objective and purpose of the second part of the VEEP is to literally tackle that exact thing about coming up some sort of commonality of language where people have joined up understandings about where people are coming, etc., etc. And it's not just kind of one language carrying some sort of expertise and hierarchical power over. So that was a nice segue into an example of what's happening in relation to language. Back to the themes very quickly. we were covering the two educational teams, and I suppose one of the things that came up for us was, and we didn't all get a chance to voice on this, but a couple of us were saying that we have experienced in schools, primary and secondary, that there is a change. So in relation to point 5, that people are bringing in much more kind of about emotional well-being, emotional intelligence, wellness, holistic approaches, and we're experiencing that in a lot of schools. And one of the points made was that it often comes up in secondary school in some of the subjects you don't get marked on. And maybe one of the calls to action might be, well, let's mark CISP and SPHE or whatever it's called as well, and then give people an incentive to actually engage more with those kind of subjects, because those subjects are probably the best life learning places. We then we didn't really get talking too much, but we moved into, well, what happens in the community around education. We thought families are often left by the wayside, so families have to be absolutely engaged with in relation to anything around schools, anything around after school activities, around kind of support in relation to holistic mental health approaches. Didn't speak too much in the last one, which was about a holistic cross-disciplinary approach to education with the new paradigm of mental health. It was more about a general nods of agreement that this is absolutely essential if we're going to be able to move away from the old paradigm, because the old paradigm is wrapped up in singular education that will just ensure the same old problem continues unless we have cross-fertilization of education. That's probably as much as I got in my summary. Is there anybody else in the group could jump in on something I might have missed out that is crucial in there as well?
I think you were spot on, Liam.
Oh, cheers, Kerry. Okay, well, that's us then, Martha.
Thanks so much, Liam. Great. And Rachel?
So Adele kindly volunteered to give the feedback from our group.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Adele.
All right, thanks. So with regards to the Ballymun Declaration, so it's from needs to rights, and the fact that sometimes needs need to be met by families. You mentioned the community collaboration. Is everyone represented? And the LGBT, like in a case of, as somebody mentioned, who's not in the room, neurodivergency, literacy, the balance of human rights versus needs. Then we looked at cultural competency / cultural humility. Rachel mentioned Australia does cultural competency training. So we looked at the cultural knowledge, to be all-inclusive, from Islam to Hinduism, possibly cultural education, maybe do what Australia is doing. We looked at anti-racism and anti-prejudice training and cultural diversity. The Donegal intercultural platform was mentioned, in that they have critical conversations, coffee mornings with the communities, discussing boundaries and such like. The Educational Training Board is including cultural training and addressing conscious bias. It's showcasing good practices and encouraging compassion. And the last bit then was holistic, person-centered, trauma-informed. We were talking and emphasizing about how we need to support peer and community support. The arts, the workshops, and the resources to deliver same, how they are important for giving everybody a voice and confidence and battling isolation. And then the All Ireland of Ireland mental health care support, prevention, synergies. And then blue sky thinking was peace education, possibly, and an accessible version of the declaration for the community. I probably missed out a few things there, but if anybody would like to add.
I think that was fine. Thanks, Adele.
Thanks so much, Adele. Brilliant. Any final thoughts on any of that? I know, John, you've been beavering, putting stuff in the chats of things that were missed as well. I've asked Eleanor to give me a copy of and anyway, I forgot that it was being recorded, and I was furiously writing as well.
Just in terms of funding for community development work, I think, a lot of the funding comes through the HSE, and it's usually aimed at service providers. And there's some stipulation in there as well, because having set up the National Traveller Mental Health Network, we were looking for some core funding to empower the community to articulate their voice in relation to mental health. And getting funding is a challenge for if it's outside of a service provision. So it is, and sometimes it stipulates in the service level agreements that you can't lobby or that you're not supposed to be lobbying as part of that. So I do think there's a need to kind of to look at funding for community development that empowers people to articulate that voice in forums that's organized by the community. And when I say the community, I should be saying communities, because I think we need to do, as I was saying earlier on in the group chat, we need to be clear about different interventions, because some will be individuals, some will be coming from the traveller community, there'll be other communities. So it's about community interventions rather than community interventions, if you know what I mean. So just to differentiate, and I think that the Ballymun Declaration is very good. I think maybe a little bit more work in kind of putting a bit of meat on that in terms of making sure that it's inclusive of people, because if we're talking about inclusion at you know, in terms of mental health at another level, we need to make sure that the voices of the different stakeholders are included in the declaration as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Thomas. Lisa, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say, just to echo what Thomas said there. So we have a situation, for example, where, you know, let's say through the social prescribing service, we would have a lot of people now who would have gone through the service, had maybe a good experience or maybe challenges in terms of transport or whatever. And it got to the point where you now looking for mechanisms to pool those issues. And like many of us sit on, you know, somebody mentioned it here, on structures like the Age Friendly Initiative or whatever. And I know through my experience, and because I'm part funded through the social inclusion program, I can, you know, organize things like, we call it like an alumni club hub, where we meet with people on a quarterly basis to kind of try and pool what's going on and to help, I suppose, shape our service kind of backwards. So it's not the ideal scenario where, you know, let's say something like a social prescribing program is designed with people, but we're trying to at least kind of come at it from the back to strengthen people and empower people so that their voices are heard in terms of, for example, why they couldn't, you know, link in with the community in the first place. And that's kind of very interesting. But the problem is, and as somebody here said, is that that piece is actually not resourced. So that's us deciding that we need to do that in order to make sure, for example, that all of these people don't just bounce back to the service again, or they just bounce back. So, because that's the longer term piece that we all understand when you do community development or you work in community education, that, you know, how long it can take for there to be meaningful change in somebody's life. And I feel some of these programs, and I suppose I work in one, I coordinate one, you know, but some of these programs expect you to basically just create this change within 3 months, and that's just not going to happen. So I think, and there's a real kind of, I suppose, consensus among a lot of people in my line of work, who would say that, for example, it can be really difficult to close cases and be ready for newer referrals or whatever if there is no kind of infrastructure in place, if you know what I mean, at community level to then deal with that. And that's where we feel, it being in a community development organization, we are in a really good position to highlight that and show good examples of where it is. But we've gone back, for example, to the HSE to say, you want all this to happen, this is wonderful, but do you know how much added time is going in from us? It's not just the worker you're funding, it's all of the other stuff around it. And I think that's what's happening in a lot of places, and that's where it's under-resourced, you know? So this is great to hear. And I think there is real, let's say, promise in all of these different departments working together. I think it can work really well if it is well resourced and if it's designed together, and if those kind of various levels continue to communicate. So it's as I said, it's really great to see that the experiences are kind of being pooled here. And I think whether it is mental health or whether it's well-being initiatives, I'm sure that what I always say is, you can see that everybody's heart in the right place, is in the right place to try and want to make a change. But unless you actually support the person that's just gone through a program, that they can really embed that now. You know, we had even things like, you know, initiative with the Heritage Office, because we realized that the sense of place and the community belonging, which really important and was really important, particularly for men in the community. But of course, that's not being measured over here. That's us seeing that. So there are so many examples, and you mentioned some great examples in the community of how these needs were being pooled and kind of fed back to kind of influence policy making. But I think this is really, really important to say it's not just a quick fix of 3 months in a wellbeing program initiative and you're done and you're sorted and you're well, but that there really is that handover of trust as well to the community organizations and resourcing it, because that's really what it takes, to be honest.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Any other comments?
I think that just measured, and I think what that and I don't take up other people's time, but I think what you said there, Lisa, is very true. That funding is looked at and measured in things in very, you know, and it doesn't always work like that in terms of communities, and you know, kind of. So just to say that, I think that kind of.
Yeah, and it's great to see that kind of analysis through this social prescribing as well. Yeah, great. Okay, so I promised everybody we would kind of be finished by about 1:30. So I know Eleanor's been great at collating all the information as well, so we'll get that out to you. And thanks very much for joining us on this VEEP webinar. And hopefully we'll see you soon.